State, and federal regulations mandate that you flush the pills so that they can't be reused, so children don't get hold of them,
Right.
or they get sold on the street for street value.
Okay, so now this is my question. Now everything's in the toilet.
Mm-hmm.
How does it get from the toilet to the water supply?
That's why I love this little diagram that we like to put up on how it gets there. Now, any sort of water that you have gets recycled.
Right.
Comes from somewhere. So your septic system is below grade.
Mm-hmm.
And your well is lower than that, and it eventually gets into your well and gets into your drinking water. And if you're not on a well, it comes from some sort of an aquifer, some sort of a water source.
So it goes from the toilet either into a septic, into your groundwater, which your well is connected to, or it goes, like we're on city water.
There are some studies where they study the population's illegal drug use using the sewers. So they'll test for cocaine or heroin in the city effluent on a year-to-year basis, saying, well, drug use is up, more of it
In
the sewer system than we did last year. So it's a science that's very well studied.
So it's definitely, now they're studying the sewer, but how does that come into the drinking water?
Well, that's where the drinking water comes from.
See, I'm ignorant, I have no idea.
Well, it doesn't come directly. I mean, there are plenty of water sources that are pristine, just they don't happen to be typically close to many populations.
Right. Now, are the doses, like, so to tie it all together, the cytotoxins go into the sewer system, they get into the water supply. What percentage are you looking at? Is it something to really be concerned about in your household? Like, what are we?
Well, with drugs in the water, what I like to say is drugs in the water are chemicals in the water, and drugs are chemicals too. So I really don't care about how much aspirin's in the water or how much Tylenol or for most drugs, they're not effective at very low levels.
Right.
And that's where the big issue is who really cares if we have drugs in the water, because we take them into our body.
Right.
But there's a certain category of drugs, which is cytotoxic drugs, that are effective on a very low level. And I was telling you, I gave a presentation to about 100 people in Boston area, at every hospital in New England. And the name of the summit was Troubled Waters. Drugs in the water, why do we care?
Right.
And I had every hospital in New England, and I had about 15 pharmacists. And one of the eye-opening things for me was, if you ask the pharmacist, as I did, I said, has anyone ever manufactured or made a drug in a nanogram per liter? And I had a pharmacist right in the front row. He was the head of the Mass Pharmacy Association. He said, sure, nanogram per liter. I said, have you ever made one in a picogram per liter? He says, yeah, I have. Is a picogram per liter smaller than a nanogram? I said, yeah. So the analogy I like to use is that a nanogram per liter is a part per trillion. And if you take a part per trillion, you administer it to a patient and their hair nearly falls out. It's
Of the cytotoxic,
of a
the
cytotoxic chemo drug. It's a pretty serious chemical. And the analogy I gave to the summit was, if you take $1 trillion and you stack it like a deck of cards, it's going to reach from Boston to the middle of Ohio. You take one of those dollar bills and you inject it into a patient, and the absorption rate on a chemotherapy drug may be 10%, say, well, probably less than that. Only a small portion of that gets into the body's cells.
Right.
And the side effects are so severe that it nearly kills the patient, and their hair falls out. So these are chemicals we should be caring about.
Right. Now, has the EPA done anything about, like, that? Wouldn't that be a flashing red light instantly?
Well, the EPA is looking at it now. I've been talking with some high-level people at the EPA, and they're starting to take a look at the cytotoxic drugs. There's a gentleman named Michael Firestone, who's head of the EPA Center for the Children and the Environment, and he just published a wonderful document, which I have here. It's the EPA's strategic plan for for testing chemicals.
Right.
And what it does is first time that the EPA and the FDA and OSHA and NIOSH, which is a branch of OSHA, have all worked together to test the toxicity of pharmaceuticals.
Right.
Drugs are chemicals too. So if you look at just those 3 areas that they're looking, cytotoxic agents have the lowest dose response.
Right.
The mechanism of action by altering genes is very severe,
Right.
and genotoxicity is what they do.
Right.
These chemicals are designed specifically to mutate human genes.
Right. So now that's one thing that is kind of confusing. So it's not only when you take something like that internally, it's going to come out one way. Won't it also come out your pores and your hair and?
Yeah, absolutely. You excrete the material mostly through your urine and your feces, but you also will sweat it out. It comes through your hair sweats. If they test for illegal drugs, they take hair samples.
Right.
And that's because the drugs are still remaining in the hair as it sweats it out.
Right. So now that's my concern. Now this is a zero tolerance OSHA drug. Nobody can come into contact with it. So now you've taken it, you've gone home. Doesn't that leave your family around you at all times that are coming into a byproduct of the drug?
Absolutely. It does.
So now what can people do about that?
Collect it. I mean, it's fairly simple. The drug companies are even starting to tell people to stay away from your family members. For years, probably the last 5-10 years, they've been saying pregnant women stay away.
All right.
And that's because you can breathe the drugs out. You can come through the pores.
Yeah, I noticed that my friends that are on it, like, it smells sweet almost coming out of their breath.
All chemicals smell.
Yeah.
All smells are chemicals.
Right.
So what you're smelling is chemotherapy drugs.
So now how can they go about containing it?